Good evening. My name is Brian Larkin, and I'm the Director of Latino Latin American Studies here at St. John St. Ben's. I'd like to welcome all of you to our last speaker for this semester on the topic of Guatemala Challenge and Promise. Before we begin tonight, I'd like to give you a little bit of information about the Latino Latin American Studies program. As you can see from on the screen right now, the Latino Latin American Studies program consists in one part of an interdisciplinary minor. It's 5 classes, 2 of which are required courses in Hispanic studies, and the other 3 are courses that you can take from a wide variety of disciplines: history, theology, political science, Hispanic studies, English as well, sometimes philosophy as well, but over 3 courses from a number of disciplines. If this is something that might interest you, I'd be very interested in talking with you, glad to talk with you. I will be around at the end of tonight, and if Latino Latin American Studies sounds like something that you want to do, please come and talk to me. The other component of Latino Latin American Studies is this lecture series that we do. Each semester we choose a theme and have a number of lectures and events that address that theme. This semester the theme has been Guatemala, and as I said, tonight is the last of the 3 that we're doing this semester. Next semester's theme is Francis, the first Latin American Pope, and we're having a series of 3 lectures scheduled around that topic that will introduce you to the background to Francis, and take you all the way through his current papacy and how his papal priorities have been shaped by his Latin American background. The other thing that we run in conjunction with the lecture series is a reading circle. And students can enroll in the reading circle for either 0 or 1 credit. And what the reading circle consists of is attending all of the events for that semester. So for next semester, it will be the 3 lectures on Pope Francis and his background. And then coming together as a group and doing a series of readings and getting a deeper understanding of that particular issue. So if you're fascinated by Pope Francis, as I know a number of people are, it would be a really good opportunity to get to know more about him, to join the reading circle. And if you want more information about that, I'd be glad to talk to you about that as well tonight, or you can contact me at my email address, or give me a call or stop by my office. So with that said, I'm going to turn the mic over to Professor Roy Ketchum, who is going to introduce tonight's speaker.
Hello, thanks to everybody for coming out tonight. Before introducing Katherine, I just want to say a brief note on the premise and where we've come with this lecture series. As many of you know, and some I may be just sharing this with you now, so 2016 marks the 20-year anniversary of the 1996 peace accords in Guatemala that brought to an end 36 years of armed conflict. A really atrocious time in Guatemala history. And so 2016 in some ways serves as a moment to reflect on what challenges remain and what promise might be forthcoming. In a lot of ways it has to do with looking at civil society, looking at institutions, looking at popular culture, looking at ways in which people go about addressing the challenges that they have and how they might come together to move forward as they to address the legacy of that long period of time. So for those of you that were here for those that weren't here for the earlier part, we had a filmmaker in the first series that talked about migrations, Guatemalan migrants in Minnesota, actually. The second one was a Guatemalan of Maya Quiche ethnicity who talked about the literary movement within Guatemala and what that has to do as a social movement. And so tonight, we have Katherine Nystrom, and it's a special privilege for me to be able to introduce Katherine. She's back home here at St. Ben's. She was a biochemistry major at St. Ben's and studied abroad with me in Guatemala in 2012, graduated then in 2013. And I think in some ways it was in part during that context while studying abroad and seeing issues of health, particularly among indigenous, poor, and rural people being most impacted in Guatemala, that she recognized the possibilities of a career in public health. So she went on to graduate school right after graduating from St. Ben's in the program in global public health with a concentration in epidemiology at Emory University, and she graduated last spring. During her time at Emory, she had the opportunity to do a practicum, a fieldwork experience in the region of Coban and Alta Verapaz in Guatemala. And she's going to talk more about that today. As a graduate student and in her current job at the Office of the Legislative Auditor in Minnesota, she focuses on program monitoring and evaluation. In a lot of ways, what that means is combining quantitative and qualitative research approaches to be able to test and verify how effective a program is, how well does it fulfill its promise. And that's a lot of what she's going to talk to us about today. And the format I think that she's going to follow is to give you a broad context of some health issues and some of the indicators of ongoing challenges and some maybe minor improvements that we can see within Guatemala. For a broader context, she's going to show us a documentary on the program in fact that she worked with in Coban Alta Verapaz, and then she has some reflection questions for us to talk about in small groups, and we'll open it up for the wider conversation. So again, it's a special privilege to be able to welcome Katherine Nystrom back home here to St. Ben's. And come on.
All right, thank you, Roy, for that introduction. And I'd also like to thank the Latino and Latin American Studies program for inviting me to come back to St. Ben's, St. John's. I really feel fortunate to be here tonight because I get to combine three of my favorite things: Guatemala, St. Ben's, St. John's, and public health. So today I'm just going to be giving an overview of the 20 years of successes and opportunities in Guatemala. And then I'm going to speak a little bit more of social roots of health disparities. I'm going to then focus the conversation on more around reproductive health in Guatemala, which is my particular passion. And then we are going to watch a documentary, do a reflection, and then I'll speak a little bit about the work that I did in Guatemala. So to start off, when thinking about 20 years of success and opportunities, I wanted to first reflect on the Millennium Development Goals, or the MDGs. The MDGs were established in 2000 by the United Nations as a way to evaluate and assess how low and middle income countries around the world were developing. So due to the nature of development, public health is integral to development, and fortunately for public health professionals, we are able to see some of these statistics at a countrywide level. So I first wanted to address the extreme poverty goal. So the goal was to have extreme poverty in each country, and that's the indicator that they use is the proportion of population living below $1.25 per day. As you can see, Guatemala experienced a 16% decrease between 1998 and 2011, which fell short of the 50% goal. Another goal that was for hunger was to have the proportion of population below the minimum level of dietary energy consumption. Also, you can see that Guatemala fell short of that goal and actually increased the proportion of population living at this level. Another goal that addresses universal primary education was to have all children enrolled in primary education. Guatemala saw a 16% increase between 1997 and 2013, but still also fell short of that goal. Gender equality is another issue in developing areas, and one of the indicators is ratio of girls to boys in primary education. Guatemala got pretty close to this goal, the goal of equality, but the ratio is still at 1.96. These next three goals are a little bit more related, directly related to health. The child mortality MDG was to reduce under 5 mortality, which is the death of children per every 1,000 live births. The goal was to decrease it by 2/3, and Guatemala is close to that goal with a 62% decrease over 23 years. The maternal health MDG is to reduce maternal mortality by 75%. Again, Guatemala fell short of that goal at 48% decrease. Next, contraception prevalence. The goal was to have 100% of women using some sort of family planning, and in Guatemala in 2009, 54.1% of women were using some sort of contraception. And here is a shining light in the MDGs. This first environmental health goal, Guatemala did exceed. The goal was to have the proportion of population who were using a drinking water source that was unclean or unsafe. And Guatemala actually experienced a 69% decrease of those without access to an improved drinking water source by 2015. Next, and on my last indicator today, is the proportion of population using an improved sanitation facility. The goal, again, was to have the proportion of those who weren't able to use this type of sanitation facility, and Guatemala experienced a 32% decrease. Before we move on to the remainder of the presentation, I just wanted to give an overview of what the healthcare system in Guatemala is like. The healthcare system is a multi-payer system similar to the United States, where we rely on several different sectors to provide healthcare for us. So in Guatemala, those who are fortunate enough and have the money to spend to buy private insurance or can pay out of pocket to private providers primarily use the private sector. The public sector is one of the other three, which is primarily serves those who are in low income situations or don't have access to the private sector. The public sector funding from the government has improved since the signing of the peace accords, but spending has not met need. The GDP expenditure on health in Guatemala is one of the lowest in Central America. The picture on the screen is actually the public hospital in Coban, and it's the only public hospital in Alta Verapaz. I had the opportunity to speak with a OBGYN at the facility, and for the interest of time, if you want to ask me more about that later, I can talk about it later. I just don't have enough time to talk about his experience right now. And then the third area that provides a substantial amount of healthcare in Guatemala are non-governmental organizations and nonprofits. These organizations can be multinational or domestic, or a mix of multinational and domestic. For example, the organization I worked with was a domestic organization that used multinational funding to support their programs. So now I wanted to look a little bit at the disparities. And it's important to note that while there are large disparities between the ethnic groups, so the Ladinos, or the people who are of European Spanish descent, versus the indigenous Maya, those disparities are large, but the disparities between the rural and urban populations, as well as those who are on the poorest end of income and those who make the most money, those disparities are also very large. So I picked two indicators to kind of illustrate this. The first is the proportion of children under 5 who are underweight. In urban settings, only 8.2% of children under 5 are underweight. But in rural settings, 15.9% of children under 5 are underweight. This gap is much larger when you look at the richest quintile and then the poorest quintile for income, with 3.2% of the richest 20% of children under 5 are underweight, whereas the 20.8% of the poorest 20% of children are underweight. So that's 1 in 5 children. 1 in 5 children. So that's 1 in 5 children. And this next indicator is is very important, particularly in Guatemala. So a skilled attendant at birth, or skilled birth attendants, I guess is another word that I might use. That basically means that somebody who is skilled in providing birthing services, is present at a birth. So this can help reduce the possibility of infection. It also, if there's an emergency, they also have the skills to help women get the services that they really need with going to an emergency room or visiting a physician. So in urban settings, 77.1% of women have a skilled birth attendant present when they give birth, whereas 36.6% of rural women have this opportunity. And the difference is just ginormous when you look at income, with the richest 20% of women, 95.1%, so virtually all women have a skilled attendant at birth, where the poorest 20% have 20.3% do have that skilled birth attendant. Like I said before, there's large disparities in health indicators in Guatemala, and all of these indicators kind of mesh together. They kind of form a web that causes the lack of access to health services, or is a result of lack of access to health services, as well as poor health, and that causes the disparities. So some of the social determinants of this include the armed conflict, political repression, and institutionalized discrimination against indigenous peoples. Another factor is the low high school and post-secondary enrollment and graduation rates seen across the country. Another thing that contributes is poverty, and 54% of Guatemalans live in poverty, below the poverty line, which is living on less than $2 a day. This next root is especially difficult for those indigenous people, where the language barrier, because most medical professionals are Ladino and speak Spanish only, and that causes, particularly in reproductive health, it's difficult for women who do not speak Spanish to communicate and not feel embarrassed and wanting to share things about the reproductive system. I mean, that's a sensitive topic, even if you can speak the same language. The next issue is a diet that's high in starches, proteins, and carbohydrates, which lead to undernutrition, malnutrition, and diabetes. And finally, living conditions, such as living in a rural location, far from emergency health services, and just far from clinics and hospitals in general, as well as the type of building that a person lives in, access to clean water, and cooking techniques, poor cooking techniques, such as using wood to have cooking fires within the home, lead to poor health. So now I wanted to focus more on reproductive health in Guatemala, and I'll kind of introduce this, and then we'll watch the documentary that will give you a more of a context about the issues surrounding reproductive health. Guatemala has some of the poorest reproductive health indices and largest disparities in health in Latin America, particularly between indigenous and Ladino women. I already showed you the disparities with the skilled attendant at birth indicator, but I also wanted to point out that maternal mortality, Guatemala is the worst in Central America. They have the highest maternal mortality, and they're the 64th worst in the world. Similar to infant mortality, which is the number of deaths of infants in their first year per 1,000 live births, and that statistic is 26.5, which means that 2.6% of infants die within their first year. Again, the statistic is the worst in Central America and the 77th worst in the world. And it's also very important to note that 22% of Guatemalan girls give birth before age 18. Another thing I wanted to point out about disparities was the fertility by income and family planning by income. So now we're just looking at the richest 20% and the poorest 20% of women. So when you look at fertility, the statistic 1.8 means that women in the richest 20% on average have 1.8 children. So of course you can't have 1.8 children, but it means that some women have one child and other women can have 2 children, and that averages out to 1.8. Likewise, in the poorest 20%, women on average have 5.7 children. For family planning by income, the richest 20% of women, 72% use any type of method of family planning, and the poorest 20% use, or 36% of the poorest 20% use any type of family planning method. In addition to the social roots of health disparities that I presented earlier, there's additional roots that prevent women from seeking reproductive health services or getting reproductive health services, including religious opposition, a machismo culture, governmental opposition and indifference, myths, and lack of access to accurate, timely, and comprehensive information and education about sex and reproduction. And the consequences of these social roots lead to high fertility rates in both adolescent and adult women, as well as high maternal and infant mortality rates, high proportions of childhood malnutrition and stunting, poverty, lack of education, especially for girls, and gender inequality. So when I traveled to Guatemala during my master's work, I got to work at the Women's International Network for Guatemalan Solutions, or WINGS for short. Their mission is to create opportunities for Guatemalan families to improve their lives through family planning education and access to reproductive health services. They have 2 main programs. One is a network of 103 volunteer community-based promoters who provide counseling, education, and short-term contraception methods. This network is really neat because these people in the communities who are volunteering to be a promoter, they're seen as leaders in their community, and they're not necessarily trained in medicine at all, and several of them have not even completed primary school. So I think it's really great. And then the second program is the mobile and stationary clinics that provide long-acting reversible contraception and cervical cancer screening and treatment. So just also a little primer about different contraception methods. Short-term methods are condoms, pills, things like that. But long-acting reversible contraception, those are contraception options that can work for an extended period of time. So they're implants, intrauterine devices or IUDs, things like that. All right, so now we're going to get to watch this video. I think it will give you some well-needed context for this issue. So I'm just going to change over to that.
Jamás olvido el primer momento. Yo dije, ¿yo qué voy a hacer? Pero en ese momento sentí de que Dios me ayudó y me iluminó. De esa manera fue cuando Dios me mostró que sí, yo nací para atender partos.
de Noticias en Telesur, los saluda Ariel Maquirena. Los candidatos a la presidencia de Guatemala realizaron el cierre de campaña en distintos puntos de la nación. Pérez Molina lleva hasta ahora 20 puntos de ventaja sobre los también derechistas Manuel Valdizón y Eduardo Zúger. En las elecciones de este domingo, más de 7 millones de guatemaltecos están llamados a elegir al presidente, vicepresidente, 333 alcaldes, además de diputados a la Asamblea Nacional y al
Somos 12 por todo, pero 6 se murieron y somos nosotros que estamos vivos. Yo miro que cuesta porque también somos bastante. Si compramos pan y el azúcar y como compramos maíz.
Tenemos que vestirlos a los niños. Solo hasta para comprar un par de zapatos. El varón que tengo, el más grande, él ya se está dando cuenta de que pues nos ha sido así un poco difícil. Él quiere ya ayudarme. Entonces, en esa forma, él empezó a hacer su trabajito así, de estar ilustrando ahí en otros pueblos.
Cuidado con la milpa.
14 hijos, 14 embarazos tuvo su esposa.
Pues 14 por todo, pero como hay 3 muertos, son 11 vivos.
Mi trabajo es ir a la comunidad y ver la situación en la que viven las familias. Claro. ¿Y qué pensaron con lo del método?
No, yo no.
¿Qué no? ¿Por qué no? ¿Fue a la escuela usted?
No, solo.
Vaya.
Pues sí, pero no. Pues,
Pero no terminó un grado.
ni primaria.
Ni primaria. Vaya, ¿y usted quiere lo mismo para sus hijos?
Sí, no, eso
No,
ya
vaya. Eso es lo que usted tiene que pensar. Su esposa ya tiene 4 hijos. ¿Usted quiere tener más hijos?
Dios es el dueño de la vida. Cuando dijo, crezcan, multiplíquense, llenen la tierra, el deseo de Dios es vida. Tenemos deber para defender y conservar la vida.
Ese es el cambio que viene a ser la planificación, a que hayan nuestros hijos más separados, más tiempo para la salud de la mamá y para que pueda aún darles.
La anticoncepción, ya sea preservativos, inyecciones, píldoras y otros métodos, son actos que ofenden a la vida, están condenados por Dios.
La T de cobre va dentro del útero, no como la gente cree que a veces estamos matando a nuestros hijos o estamos abortando a nuestros hijos. Y eso es mentira, porque el método lo que hace es que la semilla de la mujer no se junta con la del hombre. Yo les digo que nosotras las mujeres tenemos derecho a decidir por nuestra planificación familiar. Tenemos derecho a decidir sobre nuestro cuerpo y también nosotros decidir cuántos hijos queremos tener. No el hombre tiene que decidir por nosotros.
Si una mujer hace su método, su planificación, lo hace digamos, por venganza del esposo, busca otro hombre. Si yo sé que mi mujer yo no le tengo confianza, no permitiría esas cosas. Provoca ciertas dudas. Hay hombres, hay familias que no quieren saber absolutamente nada de esto.
La cultura maya es bastante reservada. En algunos lugares de acá, la gente puede lincharlo a uno por hablar temas que están en contra de sus valores y de la cultura.
Desde hace 60 años, trabajando por un periodismo independiente, honrado y digno.
La Conferencia Episcopal de Guatemala realizó el Foro por la Vida y la Educación, donde participaron 9 de los 11 candidatos a la presidencia de la República.
La abstinencia y la fidelidad son parte básica de los valores que mantienen unida a la familia. La Constitución se establece en el artículo 1 la protección a la familia. Preferiría de cualquier forma privilegiar la abstinencia y la fidelidad que la repartición y promoción del uso de preservativos.
No es fácil transformar toda una realidad histórica de discriminación, de opresión, de violencia, de exclusión. Entonces, la meta es esa, ¿verdad? El Estado debe responder a las necesidades de las mujeres, a las necesidades de la población. Uno de los primeros logros que tuvimos fue la ley de planificación familiar. Se fue aprobada y luego, después de 5 años, imagínense, 5 años, se aprobó el reglamento por intromisión de las iglesias. Y la Constitución mandata un Estado laico donde la iglesia no se debe de meter en políticas.
La situación, qué bonito cuando hay una ley, lamentablemente es de que el cumplimiento no se le da.
En cuanto a la ley de planificación familiar, ¿verdad? Sabemos que ese es un derecho de la mujer, pero el gobierno realmente pues no apoya eso, no la defiende. Vamos a un centro y puesto de salud, lastimosamente el gobierno no hay medicamentos. Entonces, ¿cómo se va a cumplir una ley de esa manera? Si ni hay recursos para ofrecerle a las mujeres en los centros de salud.
Ahí tenemos un reto para el nuevo gobierno, que no podemos permitir que todo lo que hemos avanzado nos corten esos avances. Por eso hay que conocer también las leyes, de qué es lo que mandatan, qué es lo que nosotros vamos a demandar, ¿verdad?
Me ha gustado poder ayudar a estas familias, no importando el lugar, la necesidad, la dificultad.
No tengo de qué comer a mis hijos, mis pobres hijos sucios.
Hay niños trabajando en vez de que estén en la escuela.
Si tendríamos una familia planificada y les voy a poder dar ropa, comida, amor, una casa, salud para la mujer.
Tenemos también mujeres trabajando en casi todo el país, realizando el mismo trabajo que yo realizo todos los días.
Respire profundo, se vaya a hacer masaje.
Nos preocupa a nosotros, ¿verdad? Que haya comida para todos es suficiente.
Demasiado grandes, el papá tiene que trabajar demasiado.
Tenemos que tener mucho cuidado porque nuestro cuerpo.
¿Y ustedes hablaban ahí? Hablaban acerca de macho.
¿Para qué lado? Vamos para allá.
Vamos para la derecha.
Las mujeres en áreas rurales no tienen la oportunidad de participar, no tienen voz y voto. Se hace lo que dice el hombre. Y ya, punto.
No está molesto, ¿sabes?
هتواش كني تقابور كان مشوش كان يتقنوه من تو كان تنلي مشوش
خنا شمستاخني كيرو إنك أنا تقلا هتون كتكميكي ليش خونك إسمانا تشككوا. En el tema de planificación familiar, yo lo que quiero es de que ellos estén seguras de lo que están haciendo, conscientemente y voluntariamente.
Haciendo un poco de historia de mi familia, en realidad nosotros fuimos 15 hermanos.
En el tiempo del conflicto armado, secuestraron a mi esposo. Yo apenas tenía 21 años. Yo tuve una vida mucho más sufrida porque estuve criando a mis 2 hijas sola. Pero si yo hubiera tenido muchos hijos, no tendría las mismas oportunidades que tengo ahora. Así yo ya de grande me fui a la universidad, fui a estudiar técnico en profesionalización de enfermería.
Y a Mario le toca primero primaria el otro año.
Ay, qué alegre. Papá, a mí me gustaría saber cómo se sintió usted en su graduación.
Bien.
¿Bien qué? Bien.
Bien feliz porque voy a estar en nivel primario.
¡Qué alegre! Dios nos da la sabiduría si nosotros le pedimos. Si usted va a ser ordenado, entrega puntualmente su tarea, va a ganar.
Aquí hay muchos niños, donde quiera en las calles se encuentran más niños chucos.
Hay un niño de Santa Clara que baja aquí a lustrar. Él necesita ganar dinero para ayudar a la familia. Y ustedes no hacen eso.
No hemos planificado de eso, porque como es hacerle daño al niño, pues. Como que hagamos de que sí es una pareja de asesinos.
Hay un mandamiento, el número 5 dice, no matarás. Todo aquel que esté en contra de la vida está en contra del mismo Dios.
He tenido una experiencia. Un hombre me habló. Usted es hija del diablo, me dice. Pero yo voy a la iglesia y yo participo con aquella libertad en decir de que yo estoy ayudando a las familias para evitar pobreza, analfabetismo, muertes. Porque ¿de qué me sirve, leyendo la Biblia, de qué me sirve traer 10 niños al mundo si yo no los cuido, si no estoy en la capacidad de darles lo que ellos necesitan? Entonces, tampoco Dios me va a justificar en decir, sí, tienes razón de no cuidar a tus hijos. No, Él me va a pedir cuentas. Y cuando Él me pida cuentas, una por una, yo tengo que rendir y decirle, sin pretexto ni excusa.
Sí, Tachapawa, güey. Tachapawa, güey.
2 años tiene ella, ¿cuánto tiene?
2 años, más de 2 años, sí.
Más de 2 años. 8 con 8. A ver, los fresitos abajo. Ahí está. 79 centímetros. Ya estuvo. Ya. Gracias. A ver, venite, vamos a buscarte cómo estás en las gráficas. 27, 28, 29, 30, 31. Aquí está, mira. Peso para la edad, debajo de -3, severo. El 49% de la población guatemalteca menor de 5 años es desnutrido crónico. La desnutrición crónica, recordemos que es cuando los niños son bajitos. Entonces, pero la desnutrición crónica no tiene consecuencias solo a nivel de talla, sino que nos trae consecuencias a nivel cognitivo y social, ¿verdad? Su capacidad intelectual va a ser mucho menor. Tiene solo 4 meses, ¿verdad? 3 kilos, 2 onzas. Ya. Ya, saquemos. Fíjate que él está bien delgadito. te voy a dejar una comida y eso te va a ayudar a que tu leche sea mejor y engorde al niño. Y mire, cuénteme, ¿cuántos hijos tenés?
11.
Tres días nos separan de los comicios para elegir al nuevo presidente de Guatemala. Señor Balizón, gracias por estar con nosotros. A ver, candidato, la pobreza extrema es uno de los grandes problemas que ha afectado a Guatemala históricamente. ¿Qué propone usted?
Mientras nosotros estamos hablando acá, en esta entrevista de 1 hora, 2 niños fallecieron por falta de nutrición. Yo creo que para poder tener seguridad, primero tenemos que combatir la pobreza. Mientras haya pobreza, habrá inseguridad. Por eso el planteamiento...
Yo pues, desde era pequeña, así como mi hijo, yo iba a trabajar a las 5 de la mañana, regresaba a las 6 de la tarde, todos los días.
Yo era el más grande, de 7.
Mi papá no nos dio estudio. Llegó mi edad de 14 años. Me fui a buscar mi trabajo. Supermercado llegué. Y cuando se dio cuenta el patrón que yo no sabía
ni leer ni escribir,
yo no te voy a trabajar, andar para tu casa. Y a mí me dolió bastante. Los por es de que a mis hijos los adoro mucho, sí, porque a mí no me dieron el cariño como ellos les dan. No.
Dale, pa, déjalo, vamos a enseñar. Vamos a preguntar a tu hermano qué dice aquí. ¿Qué dice aquí, Cristian? Andrea.
Andrea.
¿Y esto?
Andrés.
Ah,
Y Andrés. Y Andrés.
¿qué yo quiero es que aprenden a leer y a escribir? Y yo no quiero que ellos sufran como yo estoy sufriendo. Sí. Cada varón quiero yo que tenga uno su título diferente. Una agronomía, otro es de mecánico, otro de maestro. Y quizás mi nena va a ser enfermera.
Llevo mochila. ¿Quién lleva?
Por eso vale la pena usar una planificación con la mujer. Solo con 4 niños que quedemos y les vamos a dar de todo lo que ellos quieren.
Les agradezco bastante. Cuídense y pasen feliz día. Gracias.
No sé leer, pero puedo entender las cosas. Aunque no sé escribir, pero lo puedo entender bien. ¿Sí? Que Dios nos perdone. Que Dios nos perdona y Él sabrá qué es lo que va a hacer con nosotros.
Esto es una labor muy dura, pero no imposible. Cada día más de alguna mujer se convence de la necesidad. No solo se convence la esposa, sino también se convence el esposo.
Lamentablemente, nosotros, dentro de nuestra cultura, hemos sido muchas veces mal informados sobre esto. Y esto es uno de los problemas, porque muchas veces nosotros hasta hace poco, es que todo esto de anticonceptivos, todo era un tabú para nosotros. Todo era un tabú.
Nuestros hijos son el tesoro más precioso que Dios nos ha dado. Dice la Biblia, herencia de Jehová son los hijos, cosa de estima, el fruto del vientre, dice. Ahora, esto no significa que, bueno, como herencia sin Dios, quien va a pintar cada ser o un docena.
yo creo que es importante que nosotros de verdad planifiquemos nuestra vida, planifiquemos cuántos hijos deseamos nosotros tener, cuánto tenemos la capacidad de darles a nuestros hijos para que ellos no puedan sufrir. Cualquier método que nos pueda ayudar, yo creo que es importante.
Pero hay que lavar la carita, mire, lavar su carita.
Se está moviendo el bebé. ¿Quiere ver? ¿Quiere sentir? Vaya. Está aquí su manita.
Sí, pues mamá, se está moviendo el nene.
Mami, amor. Vaya, ya estuvo pues, mamita. Vamos pues, ya está su suéter. Ya, vaya, vámonos pues.
Con esa historia de los candidatos, pues estaremos a la mira de ver quién queda y reforzar la labor que hemos venido haciendo.
Gracias. Cierra los ojos para ver.
Cristóbal, gracias.
Adelante, puedes sentarse.
Gracias, muy amable. Gracias, permiso. Doña Isabel, cuando tuvo a la nena en el hospitalito, ¿le hablaron sobre planificación familiar?
Me hablaron, pero yo no dije nada porque tengo miedo.
¿Por qué tiene miedo?
Porque muchos dicen que se muere uno si le ponen inyección.
Mucha gente tiene malos entendidos. Una esperanza de vida. Si llegáramos a sensibilizar a nivel nacional, miraríamos un desarrollo en relación al analfabetismo, en relación a la desnutrición y a reducir la mortalidad materna.
All right, so next, I'm going to have you guys break up into groups. Actually, I think we're gonna break up into 7 groups instead of 5 as I wrote, but if we can just number off, maybe we'll start with you right here, and then number 1 through 7, and then we'll just have the groups go like 1, 2, 3 against that wall, 4, 5, 6, 7, and just congregate around each other, and I'll come pass out questions. So, go for it. All right, so the next thing I wanted to do is to kind of hear from you guys. I walked around and I heard some really interesting discussion, but I would really like to hear if there's something that somebody thought was really great that somebody else in your group had said and contributed to the group, or if there's anything that personally you wanted to share. I'd like to hear from you. Or everybody's just really quiet or nervous. Yes.
So my group was mainly focusing on education and how that was portrayed in
the video. And one thing that we noticed is that education among women just about reproduction and contraceptives in general were really low, and that could be one solution to help solving the poverty and the malnourished rate in Guatemala, is just educating women and men about the different types of contraceptives that would help lower population, and then also allow the few children that people have the resources that they need. Yeah, great, thank you. Does anybody else have anything to share? Yeah.
We also talked about in the same group how poverty is like an extreme need right now, and well, to kind of like stray away from that, but more so in terms of like how families are making their decisions around poverty. So a lot of these families are having children and focusing more on their sons to kind of like go out there and work really early, and that's kind of playing into straying away from the family planning and things like that, So poverty is really a key factor in this, and how mothers are kind of making their decisions.
Does anybody else? Sure.
So our group was kind of like to focus on like the religion aspect, but even in like our discussion, I noticed like we started talking about religion, but all of these are related. Like we started talking about religion, and then it goes back to the machismo culture or the education of the women. So I think it's really hard to pinpoint that it's just one thing that's happening, that it's a religion. It's really a interconnection of all of these factors.
Yeah, exactly. Great. If there is one more, I'll take just one more.
I was super impressed by what the prep school kids had to say. Does anyone want to say something that you guys talked about? I was really impressed by your thoughts. So somebody say something. All right, there we go.
Yes. My group talked about religion, and we really had a good discussion about number one. And we talked a lot about how religion can really impact a community. So since the Pope has now been taking a lot of political action, he could somehow influence just changing one preacher's tune to saying that procreation is good, that could change a huge community, which could impact, just the impact keeps spreading out and getting bigger.
Great, thank you. Okay, so next I wanted to talk about the work that I had the opportunity to do with Wings, which you saw some of the women on the documentary did actually work for Wings. So the purpose of my work was to design and implement a survey of client satisfaction of the promoter of volunteer, or the network of volunteer promoters. And I was supposed to measure the satisfaction with the services that they received. Another purpose was to identify where there was lower satisfaction with services and analyze what specific components of the services were most problematic. So I developed a mixed method survey, which means it's a survey that has close-ended and open-ended response. So close-ended would be a question that ends with a single answer, so a yes, no, I don't know. And an open-ended would be asking for opinions about things, and it would be a longer conversation. I did this and did something called piloting the survey, which means that you test it with a group. I was also had the opportunity to train 2 Spanish and Kikchi interviewers, and Kikchi is the dominant Mayan language in the area. So my interviewers were in a sense bilingual with Spanish and Kikchi. We started off by conducting in-person interviews, so we went out to different sites and we sought women who were clients of the volunteer promoters, and we asked them the questions in person. However, there were some issues of just logistics. It took a lot of time to get to communities, and it was difficult to sometimes find women who would want to talk to us because of privacy reasons. Many women are actually using contraception without their husbands knowing. So with that risk, we decided to start doing interviews conducted by phone. So when we called the women and a male would answer, we would first tell them that we wanted to speak with their wife about women's health because, you know, that was the truth. But once we spoke to the woman more, we could figure out if her husband did in fact know that she was using contraception, and then conduct the survey. I did the analysis for the data that we gathered, and then I wrote a recommendation and a report. I just wanted to share some photos that I took when we were in the field. So on the top left is a photo of a community that we visited. And at the point that that photo was taken, we had been walking for at least 45 minutes from the nearest road. So you can imagine that these communities are very rural. They're not accessible by vehicles. So you can imagine just how the difficulties that poses in health care. And then the photos are at the diagonal on the top right, and then the lower left are my two interviewers interviewing women in their homes. And the picture that's right here on the bottom right is the sign that the volunteer promoters would display outside of their residence or their work, so the community knows who the promoters are and where to go to find them. We ended up surveying 120 women and 6 men. The average age of the survey respondents were 28 years old, and it ranged from 15 to 48 years. We found that the majority of the respondents spoke Kikchi. They were indigenous. They were evangelical Christians, had completed primary school or less, and were married. So some of these statistics were particularly interesting for the program staff at Wings, particularly the evangelical Christians, because that group has been known to refuse education and services and reproductive health. Overall, I found that the vast majority of clients were either completely satisfied or satisfied with the services that they received. And Wings was very happy to hear this. That means that their program in this particular aspect is doing well. Some of the open-ended responses or qualitative results, I thought these were really important. They were responses that the women gave after they said if they were satisfied or not satisfied. So one woman said she was satisfied because I am sure that I will not get pregnant with the help of the promoter. Another said the promoter is close, is de confianza, and the price is cheap. Another said, I like the service because there's a possibility to plan how many children we would like to have. Before, it was not like this. And finally, we heard this statement several times. Thanks to God for Wings. Wings is helping us to not have any more children. So just overall, my experience was fantastic. It was a nice learning experience, and getting the opportunity to work completely in Spanish was a lot of fun. I have a picture of my team on the top right, and my 2 interviewers are the people on the outside, and then the program manager is the one in kind of the middle next to me. And then the larger group picture on the bottom is the staff that worked at the office that I worked at. So here are the resources that I used to put together this presentation, and now I'd like to open the floor to questions.
Okay, another question then. You looked at satisfaction of Wings clients, and people seem satisfied. But has the number of births gone down? Has the fertility rate for those women gone down? And what is it compared to natural averages?
Yes, that's a very good question that has kind of a complicated response. So in order to measure how well the decrease, or to measure how the decrease in fertility or the use of family planning is attributed to the program is kind of complex. So we can't really take a measure overall in the district or the department to determine if the overall rates have decreased. We can really just survey the population that Wings has reached. So with that being said, I do not have that data just because it's very difficult to get. The only way to get that would be with a more of like a clinical trial setup where there would be a control group and an intervention group that received the intervention. So, yes. I'm sorry, I can't answer that question.
I just thought it was interesting in terms of seeing the division of the state and the church and the people themselves, and how they view like this planning so different, you know, and how the church were dabbing into like the state's policies and things like that, and how, for example, in the documentary, the pastor was saying how, you know, family is something that we value a lot, you know, but that doesn't mean we go out and have 12 children, you know. So in terms of like that common understanding, where is that with you know,
Yeah, I think that we're moving more towards the side that I've kind of been presenting on, whereas it's becoming increasingly recognized, the importance of using contraception, and I believe that's the way that the culture is kind of moving at this point. Yes, but you know, politics does play a role in, of course, what laws are passed, and yeah.
Yeah, because this my concern is that Guatemala doesn't have a lot of, you know, community activists, you know, and the people that are educated about this, you know, planning and stuff like that, and who are going around spreading the word. My concern is that there are not enough people doing this, you know, in terms of like just getting people to say yes to this, you know, that it's better for you, you know, and this hints the two families that kind of like one family that followed the plan and one family that didn't, you know. So it was just interesting, you know. I just think that there needs to be more community activists in terms of, you know, community.
Yeah, and one of the important things about social change too is some of these changes, particularly with using family planning, it's sometimes most effective when it comes from a grassroots type of organization or a grassroots type of movement. I think one thing to point out that you said that maybe that there wasn't very many organizers or kind of like grassroots type people concerned about this issue in Guatemala. I would beg to differ. I think that people are very interested in how to help themselves as well, how to help others out of the cycle of poverty. And when they're exposed to education about family planning, that's one thing that, or once they hear about that, or family planning being able to help them get out of that poverty, that they tell others. And I think that's also part of the culture that people really learn by telling each other things. Yeah.
Can you speak more about your interaction with the OBGYN at that one?
Sure. Yes. Yeah. That was kind of like a pivotal moment in my experience there. So I'm glad you asked that question. So I had the opportunity to tour the hospital with him, and then he also spoke a lot more about the healthcare system, which draws some parallels with our system, whereas, like I said, we have a multi-payer system, and for low-income individuals, it's very hard to get healthcare services in the United States. The same within Guatemala. There's not enough spending per capita to enable people, like all people, to get healthcare insurance, which is basically an access to healthcare. So we spoke about that for quite a while, but some of the things that I found most striking are kind of just like the visual memories I have of the hospital. Like we went through the maternity ward, and there are women in labor sitting in waiting chairs, waiting to go into the delivery room, and everything is very public. I mean, it seems like one woman delivers her baby and she's moved off to the recovery room, which is also has, I don't know, 20 to 30 beds. So it kind of has, I hate to say it, but it's kind of like an assembly line feel. And it's just, yes, it's, the reason for that is because there is not enough spending in the public sector. Yes. Okay. Any more questions? Okay. Well, thank you very much for having me.